Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I kind of find myself that every day we're talking about an exciting topic, so I think all the topics are exciting for me, but today we're going to talk about awareness. As I said, part of the basic terms, we're going to explain what is behind those terms that we are using, because not necessarily the context of the word you are familiar with is the same thing we are actually talking about. So awareness is one of them. So in simple terms, awareness is our ability to perceive a situation, specifically ourselves in the situation, is the ability to look at ourselves a little bit from a distance. If I have to put it to a very, very down-to-earth terms, I will say it's like you're watching a movie, because usually when we look at something that happened, the circumstances, we usually take a personal perspective, which makes it look at it from our angle into the situation, not necessarily providing us the ability to look at it from a higher perspective. So where we're saying awareness is the ability to look at the situation from a more higher perspective, taking into consideration a lot of other perspective. Also, of course, on ourselves, because we are actually responding to our environment, and the minute we are opening our perspective, we're actually able to see the people around us, the circumstances, and how we actually in relationship to this experience. So before I would go any further to explain a little bit how it comes into perspective into day-to-day life, I'm curious, Lena, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so awareness really is how we interact with ourselves and with people and the world around us. It's actually takes me back to the previous conversations we had. It's really being aware to the thoughts that we are thinking into what we are feeling. So those things that are stirring within ourselves based on our environments. And, it's a good analogy used in a movie theater. And it's something I sometimes use when I get stuck in my head and I'm realizing that I'm actually not being aware of really what's happening around me. I'm just basically looking at the things from my own very limited perspective. It's like, like when you go to a movie and you watch a film on a big screen and you are aware of what you're watching it, but you're not identifying with it. You're not that character. So if the character is having like a real sad time, you're not going to sit there and really become that character and cry your eyes out. Maybe you will, but only for a period of time. And when the movie ends, you leave. But sometimes we can get to a place where you can't actually leave a movie. And that's what it feels like when we're not really aware of a bigger picture. We become too identified with the character on the screen. So for me, really, then awareness is to really just take this like a step back, like what you said, Sarita, like, hang on a second, am I that character in the film or am I an observer, and create the distance and finally able to get off that cinema seat and walk out of the door. So it's really becoming, more noticeable of thoughts and feelings and emotions that are coming up, and understanding that we are not that character in the movie, we are the observer.
And you would hear us in a lot of the circumstances would ask you to be aware. Why? Because sometimes we have a certain way of pattern of behaviors, and the ability to hold that as something that you can do as a go-to, as a new reflex to be aware, will put a pause on how you react to things. And the more it comes close to your heart, the more you react, the more you would actually have no control on how you're showing up. And I'm sure that in our day-to-day, we all have aspects of ourselves we are not necessarily very happy with. And probably in the personal space between you and you probably have some things you would like to change. That we're not saying that, just very human to have that list. And when we want to show up differently, especially in the workplace, because we think some things are not working to our benefit, to have that as a reflex, to put space a little bit between me and that situation, and to cut it mid that I'm doing this again, for example, That's a very, very powerful tool to have. And probably if you want to change circumstances, to have the ability to have that perspective will give you more information on the situation that will enable you to think about other options of you to act, to show, to do. Because if we're very limited to what we are only seeing, and we spoke about thoughts, we don't have a wider options of solutions or perspective of or different options to show up differently and to change things. Part of our ability to change the magic is actually to have that as a tool, to have that space and to be able to see it as a movie.
Yeah, and sometimes, we've got to repeat the same thing over and over and over again until we're like, I'm doing this again, right? And, we know that sometimes we like run certain patterns, meaning we repeat the same things over and over, and we somehow expect different outcome, but the outcome is always the same, and we end up disappointed with it. So by then becoming aware to what you are doing and the end results, this is one of the stages of this whole, I guess, awareness process, because that's the only way we can actually start doing things differently. And important thing here is not to beat yourself up, because with this kind of realization, often we go, oh, I've done it again. I wish I could have done things differently. What's wrong with me? And we start judging and blaming ourselves. But actually, in reality, it needed to happen. You had to experience the same situation, even if the outcome wasn't what you were hoping, over and over and over again, until you've listened to us and you like caught that. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like 10th time I've done this. Okay, well, next time, what am I going to do, right? And it's making different choice and different decision. But as I said, you can't make a different choice until you've become aware of a certain repeating pattern, the certain repeating thing in your life.
It's time for a personal story, right? I want to share a personal story.
Yeah, go for it.
I've got like an immediate reaction since I think the beginning of my life, that the only thing you need to say next to me is that a woman cannot do this. The minute you're saying that, like, I'm there to show you there is nothing that we cannot do. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm gonna catch you mid sentence. Not necessarily always it was working to my benefit, to actually proven the point that we're equal. So at the start of my career, I was part at the company that I used to work, my own company that I used to work. We were a startup. We started like about 5 people. I was the second employee. I was responsible for the technical support. And I did technical support like back 20 years ago. I know it doesn't show, but 20 years ago. And women, were not very, women did not do tech support back then. And I was an IT person back then, and that was my job. And I was very good at my job. And we had customers all over the world. I was used to going on customer support call, helping them do a lot of complicated installing and writing scripts and so on. And then I saw that the minute that they're hearing my voice, they're thinking I'm the secretary, that somebody else will come in, that I'm just holding the booking of the meeting, and I'm not necessarily going to help them. And it would usually trigger me. But as I progressed and became a manager of a big team, and I used to show up, and there was already video calling, and the Zoom or whatever you used back then was open, and they saw me, and I was sitting usually next to the account manager or the support person, and sometimes it was the guy, so they were looking at him. Sarit is not a name that you can understand if it's a man or a woman. And then they were usually waiting for me, and then they look at him and they were asking him the question, and then I came up to a solution once I put space on it. That I had my second in command was a guy named Joseph, and I said, you know what? You're going to answer it. Whenever they're going to look at you, you're going to answer. At the end of the sentence, you would say, but if you want to have a second opinion, this is actually Sarit. She is the specialist. And I can tell you that you see the smile on Lena's face, that usually was the pause and the reaction that we got to understand that, hey, a woman is the head of this department and she has value. But I couldn't do it for years. The minute I was just looking at it and came up with a different, nice reaction, I got actually the reaction I wanted. So that's like a sharing. Still, it managed me. Just let me know what women cannot do, and I'm there.
Exactly. And it's a beautiful solution, right? I mean, you can either like wind yourself up, and in the meantime, like who's actually going to be impacted? You, because this emotions, like when you feel frustration or anger, they only impact our health, because remember, they exist within us like nobody else. So we actually drive ourselves crazy. Or like you said, we can put a space behind it, and we can take a very creative approach to it, right? And then it just creates this like a nice environment.
I actually for years changed my name to Sarah. So it created a confusion between me and my team, where they were sending an email, it's Sarit, it's Sarah. People were confused. You are the same person. So not necessarily all the awareness and the solution I came to a good conclusion, but eventually I got there.
Yeah. And I mean, we all have certain triggers, but triggers, I mean, like when things push our buttons, when we lose control. For me, for example, if I would be speaking to someone and we couldn't get on the same page, like I couldn't understand what they mean and they wouldn't understand what I mean, I would get my back up. I would literally like lose my temper and my voice would change. I would get tied back. Like, well, now I'm like, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to listen. And if I still don't understand what they're going to say, then I'm going to ask them a question until I either understand, or we're just so different. We're just not meant to understand each other. And that stops all of this shoulder aches and back aches and, me being frantic about it. I mean, I still have to manage it, I guess, but I'm aware of it. As soon as I feel myself rising, I'm like, I put my feet firmly on the ground, because that helps me to kind of ground myself. And I almost imagine, I do imagine like 12 o'clock, right? And you in that center. So whatever happening on my right, whatever happening on my left, it doesn't matter. I'm centered and I'm grounded, and now I can breathe, and then I can deal with it. So even just like taking a few breaths, or if you're sitting on a chair, you can put your feet firmly on the ground. Imagine 12 o'clock. You are centered, you're composed, you're right there, you're present, and everything else from that space is just, then you can start kind of navigating any challenge, any situation that you're presented with.
You're taking my speciality away from me, the present moment. That's a whole
that's your baby. You can talk about that, but on a different video.
Different video.
Yeah. And guys, like I sometimes hear from people, I'm self-aware. And actually, I don't believe we can ever be self-aware,
Completely self-aware.
We are getting to a certain level where you're like, yes, I'm aware of why I react a certain way, why I feel a certain way. But as you break through the threshold, there's going to be something else and something else and something else. And the more you kind of, what it does, it expands your consciousness. And we're going to do a video on consciousness. It expands your awareness. It expands your mind. You begin to understand that there is no limit to it. You can't. It's like, because once you become aware of everything, you become enlightened, right? Or it's like end of your kind of reincarnation on earth if you're into this kind of thing. So what I'm saying is like, don't let your mind tells you that you're aware and you've done enough work. No, you just moving through the next barrier, through the next thing, through the next chapter of your life. I just wanted to be very specific about that.
But awareness is power.
Yes.
And awareness is putting stuff in the light, and the only thing that you can deal with it, regardless if you think whatever, because the minute you are limited and you're saying that you are aware, you need to understand there is always the next thing to be aware. So it's like a circle that keeps extending. So it's all about flexibility, and remember that thought are not a real thing. So, but awareness is, and the minute you put something in the light, that's the best place it can be. So having that understanding of what awareness is, and even you can do it in all parts of your life. You pick something and you stick to it for a while until you get a wider perception. That's the power. And that's what we wanted to say today. Awareness is power, is putting stuff in the light and getting a more perspective to myself as a player in a scenario, in a story, in a circumstances.
Yeah. And just, also like how you can test if you became, if you kind of overcame, I guess, or you moved past a certain barrier in your life, is one of my favorite phrases that I say when the circumstances around you haven't changed, but the way you respond has. So like Sarit gave an example with, with her meetings, with the Zoom calls or whatever calls you used to do. And I gave an example with me losing my patience when somebody wouldn't understand me. Like now we respond differently in that same environment. And that's how we know we mastered certain aspects of ourselves. And then there's
To the
always
next level, to the next
next
challenge.
level above and beyond.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No,
No.
I think
Cool.
it was a good conversation.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, as always, thank you so much for being here. If you like this video, subscribe.
Like, subscribe, the bell, whatever.
Yeah. Let us know what you want us to talk about. Share, like, whatever. Engage. We'll see you soon. Bye.